Good evening. Call to order this Committee of the Whole meeting of the Winston-Salem City Council and ask the City Secretary to call the roll.
Present. Here. Here. Here.
Good afternoon. Here.
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 Present.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We are going to undertake several important discussions today. Acting as the Committee of the Whole of the City Council, will not be taking any official actions tonight, but receiving information that will be coming to light a little bit down the road. First item is a presentation of the 2017 through 2021 strategic plan. Council members obviously will remember the hard work that we did back several weeks ago, as we spent 2 days working on the areas we want to concentrate on over the next 4 years. So with that, I'll turn it over to the City Manager for comments.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, members of the City Council. The two items that we're going to discuss tonight are probably the most important strategic items that a council adopts. First, your strategic plan. We're going to come back and show you what you asked to do and work through the details. And second, as we start talking about the budget and aligning the budget with that strategic plan and setting your priorities based on where your dollars go. So these are pretty critical, not action tonight, but just strategic discussions about where we're going, short-term and long-term. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Rao to introduce his staff to go through each section.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, members of the City Council. Good afternoon. After the Mayor and Council conducted their strategic planning workshops, the City Manager's Office decided to create the new Office of Performance and Accountability to better position the organization to implement the Mayor and Council's 4-year strategic plan. That office was created by really bringing together existing staff and positions. There are really two essential focuses of this office. One is on data analytics, really positioning the organization to better use data and evidence to manage operations, to ultimately to inform citizens and to increase our transparency. The second part is we brought in the internal audit function of the city to continue our compliance work as well. So we really felt like it was an appropriate combination for both focusing on performance and on accountability. I'd like to introduce Scott Tesh, who has been named the Director of the Office of Performance and Accountability. Mr. Tesh was with the City Budget and Evaluation Office for 6 years, has gained a lot of experience, overseen a lot of the larger budgets, larger department budgets of the city, and so he is going to be leading this office and helping, again, position the city to better utilize data and evidence going forward. Mr. Tesh.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council. I'd like to say thank you to Ben and to the manager as well for giving me the opportunity to be here today. We're here to talk about the strategic plan. It really is my pleasure to talk about the strategic plan with you, to talk about the direction that you will set forward for the city. 3 things we want to go over. One, a quick review of the process. Excuse me. There we go. That led us to where we're at. Talk about the draft strategic plan that you received last week, how it's put together and the action items that are in it, and to discuss the next steps going forward, how we use the strategic plan and how we measure how well we're doing what we say we're doing. So quickly, you know that staff engaged Fountain Works to facilitate a strategic planning process. They engaged senior staff in January and did a context mapping exercise to look at trends and changes in demographics in the city and the way that information is accessed. They looked at political factors, both federal and state and local levels, the economic climate, both locally and at a macro level, technological factors. They looked at emerging technologies and talked about the digital divide, customer needs, so things out in the community, the way that people access information, the new services that emerging folks may need. Looked at certain uncertainties and takeaways. So they looked at the trends in those first couple of categories and said, what are the political uncertainties at the state and federal level, maybe some of the municipal revenues that we'll be looking at. But they came away and said, there's a positive local economic climate currently, looking at all the information that we have. There are a lot of expectations and limited resources, but that this strategic plan is a way to really focus on the things that we need to do going forward. They did a brainstorming exercise, looked at potential priorities for 2017 through 2021 in each of the 6 strategic focus areas. That led us to the workshop in late January that you were at for 2 days. You also went through the same type of context mapping exercise to look at those same factors. From that workshop, you reaffirmed the city's 6 strategic focus areas and the objectives underneath each one of those focus areas. There are between 3 and 7 objectives underneath each one of those focus areas. And perhaps most importantly, what you did also was set the short and midterm priorities that are in the strategic plan. Going through and looking at individual priorities, which are called strategies in the plan. You ranked by voting on those. The ones that were at the top of the list became short-term priorities, and those that were further down the list became the midterm priorities to work on in the next 1 to 4 years. You also looked at decision filters, ways to look at emerging issues, ways to perhaps provide some context to whether or not things should be funded and the amount of resources that go to them when they come forward. So quickly, I want to go through each one of the strategic focus areas. The first, economic vitality and diversity. These are the 7 objectives reaffirmed that are under there. You'll see that they focus mostly on economic development, job growth, workforce development, small business, and travel and tourism. Under safe and secure community, those objectives have a strong focus on increasing community engagement, reducing crime and the incidents of reducing fire incidents, and reviewing public safety infrastructure needs. Under the livable neighborhoods strategic focus area, there are 7 objectives, many of them related to reducing blight, improving access to affordable housing, looking at recreation needs, and expanding healthy food options. There are 5 objectives under the healthy environment strategic focus area. Thematically, they deal with sustainability issues, stormwater, and recycling, as well as others. Quality transportation has 3 objectives aimed at improving vehicular transportation, increasing resources for pedestrian transportation, and reviewing local and regional transit strategies. And finally, service excellence has 4 objectives reaffirmed, many that dealt with citizen feedback and communication, using data to evaluate and improve city services, and then also looking at the potential for a future bond referendum. In summary, there are 55 strategies amongst the 6 strategic focus areas. 25 of those are short-term strategies, as ranked by the mayor and city council. Short-term meaning that we would expect there to be an action item completed by the end of the fiscal year 2018. There are 30 midterm strategies, which would obviously be things that we worked on after or do after the fiscal year 18, but many of them may be things that city staff will begin working on during the fiscal year 2018. Underneath each of those strategies, senior level management looked at individual action items to move the needle associated with those strategies. You see them in the draft plan. There are roughly 120 created action items in the draft strategic plan, and you can see from the bullet points there, a majority of them fall out in economic vitality and diversity, safe and secure community, and livable neighborhoods. That's because there are more strategies in those areas and therefore more action items created for those strategies. So what I want to talk about next is kind of from where we're at to next steps. So the review and approval process. We were obviously looking for feedback from the mayor and city council on the plan itself, the strategies, and most importantly, those proposed action items. We will be bringing all of these, or to all of the committees, the draft strategic plan so that we can get your input. Individual committees will be asked to look at specific sections of the document, but you can look at any part of the document. We would ask that you provide that feedback to us here in April, and then we will bring the plan back in May for adoption. So continuing on, alignment with vision and budget. One of the strategies and things that was discussed very heavily at the January retreat was the city's mission, vision, and values permeating into the organization. And so city's HR staff is already working on revamping employee development opportunities, including orientation and quarterly supervisor training, to make sure that people understand the mission, vision, and values of the organization and how they fit in to the overall picture. We want to continue to align the strategic planning goals with the budget and with how resources are allocated. If you'll remember, in the previous year's budget, the budget was reorganized by a strategic focus area instead of service area. And so that was the first step in moving towards aligning the strategic plan with resource allocation going forward. We will continue to do that. The action items themselves are being assigned to departments. Remember, there are roughly 120 of them. They will become short-term items, will become part of work plans for FY 2018. We are establishing deadlines for each of those short-term items for what is deliverable and would potentially come back to council for approval if needed. We will seek your review on these individual action items, but because one is not there does not preclude it, obviously, from being done. The development of additional key work items will take place and can take place to support all of the strategies in the strategic plan. On the performance management side, we're going to identify and track key performance indicators. My office is over top of the city's performance measurement database, which has roughly 600 measures in it. We want to be able to distill that down into the most important measures that inform the city residents, the city council, and city management about how well we're doing what we're doing, with a specific focus on outcome measures. What is a program intended to do, and is it doing it or not? Those will be the basis for how we report on the strategic plan and how we do open data reporting going forward. How well are we performing at something? Not just a workload measure of how much of it are we doing. Enhancing performance management strategies. We are looking to partner with some academic institutions to look at a STAT-type program. If you're familiar with the City Stat program in Baltimore, those have proliferated throughout the nation. We are looking at, and have had done them previously, but looking at bringing back that STAT-type program to review outcome measures and work on making sure that departments understand their role in using their data effectively to manage their operations. We want to provide transparent reporting of program outcomes. So again, this goes back to not only how we report on the strategic plan itself, but more formally, monthly performance indicator report and the things that we make available on the city's website. We want them to have form and focus on how we're telling our story about what we're doing and how well we're doing it. And we want to continue to use performance information as much as possible in employee evaluations. So finding ways to add objective, quantitative information to the performance review process annually. Assuming that the budget includes this, we will begin doing again the community-wide citizen survey. I believe it's been 6 years or so since the last one took place for the city. This is an excellent opportunity, best practice among many cities nationally, to look at feedback from citizens on how well they perceive services are being provided. I would tell you that locally there are many cities inside the state, Raleigh, Durham, Charlotte included, and many throughout the nation that are doing this annually, not only to benchmark themselves against other cities, but to also create that trend information as key indicators of how well they're moving and how well the citizens perceive that they're moving. It also provides context for future prioritization. So as those midterm priorities come forward, you know what percentage of the citizens are worried about some of the issues as they become the short-term priorities in future years. Monitoring progress. We will want to provide semi-annual reports on the strategic plan. We will obviously be doing other types of reporting on performance data as well, but a very formal report every 6 months on the accomplishment of the goals in the strategic plan. And quickly on reprioritization, we would look at potentially coming back together in a year to talk about what are now the midterm strategies, reprioritizing them into short-term strategies, and seeing if anything had changed so that it does become, at that point, a living document and not just static. Again, decision filters were one of the things that Fountain Works worked through. You see here the rankings of the individual filter types that the consultant asked you to vote on. Staff is working to create a quantitative tool where we would really produce a score from this. We would allow City Council to look at it or management to give a relative feel for whether an emerging issue should or should not have resources allocated to it. There's obviously no definite tool where it will say yes or no, but it will tell you whether it aligns with the way you thought you were putting your priorities forward at this point. So, for instance, health and safety, time sensitivity, and alignment to the strategic plan were all very important, and things like the speed to implement or whether or not it modified an existing project were not quite as important. We would provide more emphasis on those higher level items. Finally, the appendix to the strategic plan includes an alignment of the strategic plan strategies to the poverty thought force recommendations. There are 56 recommendations in the poverty thought force final report. 16 of the city strategies from the strategic plan show an alignment with the poverty thought force recommendations. There are alignments across all 6 strategic focus areas for the city and all 5 for the poverty thought force. The poverty thought force focus areas would be education, housing, health and wellness, hunger and food insecurity, and jobs and workforce. And again, those are included as an appendix to the strategic plan. The rest of the presentation that you have before you shows each one of the strategic focus areas and then the short and midterm priorities. They are in the order as they were ranked in January. And so if you want to reference those, you can. They are also obviously included in the draft document that you received, and the roughly 120 action items are also aligned with each one of these. If you have any questions about the plan, the document, or the presentation, I'd be more than happy to entertain those.
Questions, Mr. Tesh? Councilmember Burke?
I do have a question concerning the resident engagement, which is very good. And I feel that when we keep them engaged, it helps our city to become closer and we're more aware of what's going on. You mentioned something about the universities and colleges. We used to do something like that. They would come in and work. Would you go into that a little bit deeper? What universities and colleges are you talking about? Those that's directly in Winston-Salem or others than ones we have to be involved with the plan?
Thank you for the question, Mayor Pro Tem. I think when I was talking about colleges and universities, it was with respect to the performance management piece. The What Works Cities initiative is something that we have gone through Bloomberg Philanthropies to potentially partner with colleges and universities on open data reporting, performance management strategies, and some contracting, performance-based contracting work. Those universities would not be local. They're developed by the What Works Cities initiatives, and I believe they are Harvard, Johns Hopkins, and then there's another foundation that we would be working with. We are looking currently at best practices for the citizen engagement tool, and would be looking at all of the different opportunities that we have, whether it be mail, phone, in person, and which vendor or selection of consultants we might use to do that. There are a few folks nationwide that do this. For Raleigh, Charlotte, and Greensboro, and Wilmington, we've seen the same folks. The ICMA National Research Center is one. I believe that's the one that we used 6 or 7 years ago, but there are a few other vendors as well. But we are currently undertaking a best practices review to see where we should be going with that, and we'll bring something back to council to make you aware of what we see as the best practices related to citizen engagement for a citywide survey.
Councilmember Adams?
Yes, I too, like Mayor Pro Tem, I've talked a lot over the years about resident engagement and the citizens. You know, I know we have meetings and we have the website and all of this other social media, and we have city links, but we have over 240,000 people in the city, and we don't even hear statistically from a good sampling of them. I still believe that as a city that we need to actually, just like how politicians, all of us, had to do, we need to go do some door-to-door You know, just like when we want our citizens to know about zoning and things that's coming up, we have our assistants to go out and put hangers and things and leaflets on the door. You know, we might need to get, again, a strategic visioning team together of employees and maybe even volunteers to go out and actually do a better sampling of what our citizens want, need, and their expectations of us. I know it's easy to say that, well, as long as we pick up the trash and when they dial 911, and just, that's important too. But we know as politicians, there is nothing better than somebody talking to me, to my face, or trying to contact me. Again, I'd like to see us do a better job on that. I know we're looking at some other cities, Baltimore and others, to benchmark. And I think we can come up with some better ways ourselves of how to do this. I also, comments about the alignment with the vision and the budget. I think I remember I was one of the ones that talked about the training. If you were to ask a citizen whether you are an employee, another coworker, or somebody from out of town or that works in another department, and you wanted to know, ask another one of your coworkers, what's the mission, vision, and values of the organization, I would bet money less than 25% of our people could tell us what that is. And I want the staff to take away from this when I was in my years of working, and that was my job, to get the employees to understand what the vision, mission, goals, objectives mean to them. You're going to have to explain it in a less technical 30,000-foot deal. Because what we told and what I told our employees and directed them, I would tell them what it was per the company, but then I'd tell them in my words what it meant to me. And they got it. Your perception or definition of what it is may differ from everybody's in this room. But at least if anybody heard us, they would say, you know what, they're all talking about the same thing. So I would like to see us come back and do something like that that's more innovative than trying to teach it, you know what I mean, to parrot it, and it has no feeling, and I don't know what it means. Because when you have this, your employees and customers got to buy into it and actually feel what it means. But other than that, great job. Looking forward to the results and the performance indicators and if they're really working.
Scott, I want to circle back to the alignment with the Poverty Thought Force. So 16 of our 119 strategies align some way with the 56 recommendations in the Poverty Thought Force. I'm sorry,
16, not of the action items, of the strategies, of the 55 strategies.
So we are addressing 16 out of the 56, so we can make a direct correlation with that.
Yes.
That's even better.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Other questions on this part of it? All right, are there other parts you want to present, Scott, or was that all you wanted to cover today?
That's all I wanted to cover today.
Well, that's good.
That's enough.
That's enough.
That's enough.
All right. Take the rest of the day off. All right, we're going to circle back now to the second item, which is the annual budget. And City Manager, you want to
Thank you, Mayor.
see us up there?
One thing I'll add about Mr. Tesh is one of the things I've additionally charged his office to look at is quality control and performance accountability. He will be particularly using an internal audit division to do more auditing of our contractors, our employees as far as work delivery. We're also talking about potentially hiring some mystery shoppers to go out and test our customer service as well. So he's got a big work plan ahead of him. So I'm looking forward to seeing the results.
Mayor, may I just say this then? When you talk about the mystery shoppers, one thing that the TDA used to do, visit Winston-Salem, they would send people to the hotels to stay or go into the shops to see how we responded to our citizens. Sent them down into Old Salem too to see how they responded. And that gave the idea to some if we're doing good or we're doing bad.
But now, Mayor, we're moving on to the budget presentation. Mr. Rouse going to introduce You met her before, our budget director, our very capable new budget director. This is her first full budget, I believe, for Ms. Tooney.
Thank you, Mr. Garrity. Really, Ms. Toney did present the early budget forecast a couple of months ago. As we stated then, we're getting more information. We've gotten some information from the Forsyth County Tax Office, and so the numbers are starting to come into focus, but we still have a little work ahead of us. And so, as we always do at this point in the process, we're going to present to you all a trial balanced budget. And we had presented to you all a potential gap back in February when we presented the early budget forecast. Ms. Toney is going to go over the trial balance budget and how we're proposing to address the gap that we're seeing at this point.
Councilman Bessie?
Just a sort of an overall question when we're listening to the presentation and materials here. Have those been updated with the latest information that the paper was publishing regarding estimated?
Yes. We already had those numbers. Actually, the tax assessor is coming tonight to your regular meeting to present that information as well. I know there are a lot of questions about that, about the revaluation. The number is still 6% countywide for real property. However, as Ms. Toney will show you, that the personal property is down considerably at this point. And so when you factor that in, I believe our total growth is more like 3.6 at the moment.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. All right, so today we'll look at just a big picture budget overview based on the information that we have gathered thus far. I'll take you through what the projected revenues will be. Then we'll talk a little bit about the expenditures and major drivers. I'll bring up our HR director to give an update on the 1/3 study. Then we'll look at what the actual budget gap is projected to be. We'll show you a reminder of the WISTA slides that talk about the tax rate scenarios and comparisons to other cities, and then the proposed closure of the budget gap. So our fiscal year 2017 and 2018, our major revenue drivers, of course, is the property tax revenues. So the early tax base estimates really assumes about a 3.6% growth in the property tax base. That gives us approximately $2.8 million in more increase in revenue. Our sales tax receipts, we're projecting about $2 million.
Montgomery had a quick question.
I have a question on that $2.8 million. Is that based on the current tax rate, and that it will be a revenue neutral?
Right. I'll show you what the revenue neutral rate will be, but yes, it's our current rate growth based on the projected estimates for the property taxes. And then our sales tax receipts, there is projected growth of about $2 million. As you saw in the early budget forecast, our utility sales tax is slightly on a decline based on the last 4 quarters estimates. This is a little bit better than our early projections, but we're still using a conservative estimate, and it's still a decrease for electricity. It's very weather dependent. And then we're projecting a slight decrease in charges for services. That's primarily bulk container revenues.
Excuse me. I had a question. What is bulk container revenue?
I'm sorry?
What is bulk container revenue?
Bulk containers handled by our sanitation division. The dumps, yes, right.
Thanks.
The dump.
Money that comes in big barrels.
We need more of that.
Okay. The next slide shows the local option sales tax. And as you see, we've obtained growth over the years, starting with our 2015 actuals, and our projected 2018 is $36.1 million. That's about a 5% growth in our sales tax revenue estimates. This chart shows our property tax base. The top numbers are the actual total base, and the graphs show a breakdown based on the color of real property. Personal property is the red, green is the registered motor vehicles, and the yellow is the public service companies, which that's pretty much the same. You see a little growth in the real property. The personal property shows a slight decline, but you keep in mind that people have till April 15th to file their personal property, so there may be an adjustment in that soon.
Is it mostly cars?
The registered motor vehicles is mainly the cars, and the personal property is
The machinery, equipment,
Okay.
items that were goods.
Mr. Larson, do you have a question?
Yes, on the page it says increase in property tax revenue of 2.8 million on the previous slide. And then on this one, it looks like we go from 2.7 to 20 million.7 to 21. I don't understand where the 2.8 is coming.
Yeah, one is the base. One slide is about the full property base. The other slide is the actual levy from the revenue. Yeah,
So this is value, not revenue.
Yeah.
right.
So the increase in value of 2.8 million is based on the tax rate.
The 2.8 is revenue,
Revenue.
and then the 21.5 is the actual property tax base.
Value base.
21 billion.
These are in billions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So moving to expenditures. The major expenditures for the FY18 budget is mainly related to personnel expenses. So we have the public safety 2% supplemental pay adjustments, that's 1.3 million. The full year impact of the 401A plan, that's 711,000. We have the bond operating costs coming online. This is for the operating of the bond projects this year, 648,000. And then we have our 1/3 position classification and compensation study, that's 1.2 million. And then a police retention pay adjustment, and a portion of that, a major portion, is also part of the 1/3 recommendation. So our HR director, Carmen Caruth, is going to explain a little bit more about the 1/3 study.
We were expecting to have our consultant here today. Unfortunately, the storms caused her flight to have to be diverted, and she wasn't able to attend. She will be able to come on Monday for your Finance Committee meeting, and she will do a full presentation then. I'm going to just give you a general overview of the study. The primary goals of the study were really twofold. One was to assess pay competitiveness with our external markets, with other cities, how our salaries compare. The other was really to look at internal equity, meaning how jobs compare with other jobs in terms of pay and where they should be in the pay plan relative to other jobs. There were two big groups that were in the study. The first was about 700 labor, trades, and crafts employees who were a part of the study. And the other was about 500 police employees with ranks ranging from police officer up to sergeant. To provide the whole basis for the study and for making the pay comparisons, each employee actually completed a job questionnaire that just outlined what they do, what the requirements are for their job, who they report to, whether folks report to them, that sort of thing, to give the consultant a way of actually comparing jobs to the jobs that we looked at in the market, because titles don't always tell you what folks are doing. So the pay information for the jobs was gathered from North Carolina cities. They're the ones that are actually on the screen there. And the study compared hiring pay for our positions with hiring pay for comparable positions in those in those cities. Overall, what the consultant found was that we are on average 8% behind in hiring pay. And to address that, they're recommending that we actually adopt new pay plans with higher starting salaries. And I've got two. The first one is the pay plan for our labor, trades, and crafts positions. And what you will notice, or what I'd like to call your attention to, is that the one major change is that we've raised the minimum rate of pay for our employees. It was $11. It's now $11.25. So the lowest, $11.25 an hour. $11 an hour. The pay grade 1 is where you would see that, and then it goes up. With this pay plan, they've recommended slotting all positions into the pay plan based on both the market as well as how they compare and relate to other positions in the organization. So just to give you an example of what that means, we've talked with you a lot about equipment operators and equipment operator lights and how difficult it is for us to recruit them. They're recommending that equipment operator lights go into pay grade 4, and that starting salary for that would be $28,666. That's 17% above where they are now. And the equipment operator median would be 13% above where they are now. So,
yes, but would that, and I would assume, make us compatible or competitive with the others?
Yes.
Because our folks leave us and go to these other cities, so we'll be more than competitive.
It makes us competitive with them in terms of hiring. So a huge issue that we have now is that we just can't get those people.
Okay.
We can't fill those positions because our pay is so low, and then they don't stay when they come. So,
okay.
Yes, it would make us competitive. So that's for labor, trades, and crafts. We're looking at a totally new pay plan. As they study more positions, they will add to this pay plan. So that's not the 15 ranges you see there are not the end. For police, we're looking at, it's the same. They're looking at a new pay plan for police. This pay plan has no incentives in it. We would have to add this is for police with a high school education. So we would add 5% for an associate's and 10% for a bachelor's degree. But to give you some idea of what we're looking at, a police officer trainee currently starts at $33,800. We're looking at $35,800, which is a 6% increase, and that's with a high school education. A police officer, that's in pay grade 1. Police officers would be in pay grade 2, and they would start at $37,600 compared with $35,500 now, which is also a 6% increase. A police officer with a bachelor's degree would actually start at $41,300, which makes them very compatible with other jurisdictions. The other thing that we've done with this pay plan is police officer trainee is 1, police is pay grade 1, police officer is pay grade 2. They're recommending that the next rank up, corporal/detective, be pay grade 6. So it leaves us some flexibility should we want to go to another structure like police officer 1, 2, or 3 to where we could do that. And so that's pretty much where we are with that. To implement let me back up. For all of these, for both pay plans, we would have to place our existing employees someplace on those plans. You know, we have to bring them up to the minimum. So every employee who is within the study would be brought at least up to the minimum. If their pay currently is above the minimum, they would receive a 2% increase to reduce the impact of compression. And that would be for both police and for our labor, trades, and crafts employees that are on the list. With police, we actually have extended that 2% recommendation up the line because compression doesn't end just with the sergeant. So we would move it up. It would go all the way up. And the budget impact, the general fund impact of that is a total of $2 million, 1.2 for the labor, trades, and crafts study, and about $800,000 for police.
May I ask a question?
Councilman Burke.
When we look at our police today, and we look at their educational levels, not today, but bring it to me so I can just see where we are.
Okay.
And I have no problems in making us where we ought to be to keep good employees.
All right. Are there other questions?
Other questions? McIntosh?
In terms of the 10 pay grades, most people are going to be coming to us in pay grade 1 or 2, right? I mean, do we get people coming in higher up the scale?
Usually not.
Lateral? Okay.
They'd be coming in at pay grade 1 as a trainee.
Right.
And then move to pay grade 2 after they complete the LE2.
Thanks.
Councilman Larson?
So if I'm to understand this correct, in both categories, 1, 15 pay grades, and the police 10 pay grades, we currently don't have a grading system, so everybody's going to decide whether 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it would be. Is that what we're saying?
I'm not sure that I understand the
In
question.
other words, you establish a pay grade, like police, 1 through 10, and you got a minimum and a maximum within those grades.
Correct.
Right. So, and currently we do not, or we do have a pay grade system. In other words, we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, down to 10 currently. Our police force divided into those 10 categories currently?
We currently have a pay plan. It's different than this one. So we would be moving these, for the upcoming year, we would be moving these positions off of the current pay plan that we have, which does have levels, and positions are slotted into those levels.
My question is, what are the standards, and I think you probably can't answer this tonight, but what are the standards to decide whether Officer X goes into pay grade 2 or 3? And when he stands in front of you and says, okay, which pay grade am I going to be in? How is that determined whether he's in 2 or 3 pay grades?
All police officers are in pay grade 2.
There is no pay grade 2 now.
There is yes, there is, but it's not pay grade 2. It's another plan.
My basic question is, if we're going to move employees into a standardized system that is going to have categories, grades, and that movement is going to be judgmental as to what grade they fall.
It's not going to be judgmental.
All right.
It won't be judgmental. They will be in the pay grade that is assigned for that position.
Together and show you a cross-reference. So like all police officers are in that pay grade too. All sergeants are, what, 8?
They're going to, sergeants are 10.
10, okay. We'll show you the cross-linkages. The other grades are there just so that we build a structure so that if we come back later and decide we want to do police officer 1, 2, and 3, and then assign officers based on experience and things like that, you'd have that flexibility. But we're not recommending doing that right now, just assigning people directly, all police officers to the same grade, all corporals to the same grade. It's a movement for everybody in the same class.
Councilor Taylor?
Same applies for non-police.
Yes.
All city employees.
Right.
So we'll see what constitutes a pay grade 1, 2, and 3, what categories of people are in those grades.
Yes.
Taylor?
Thank you, Mayor. Mrs. Caruth, in the past, excuse me, we've done things like this for the police. Usually we follow them up with similar things for the fire department. is there a plan in place for the fire department as well for the pay scale? I'm sure I know the answer, but
The fire department and all of the other city jobs will be studied in the future. As a part of this study, we do it 1/3. It just so happened that when we put police in there, it went over 1/3 of our employees for this year. So we'll do more next year and possibly more the third year.
Mr. Adams.
thank you.
Yes, Ms. Caruth, you and your staff and everybody that's worked so hard to get us to this point. I think as the council, we knew that we were going to have to get here, and all of the different scenarios that we brought up or you brought to us just didn't quite fit. But in order to be competitive with all of the cities smaller or similar to ours in the state as well as other places, in order to retain our great employees, this is a move we had to make. And what better way that we landed on, no different than government, no different than corporate America, the grading of the pay grades. Because now you know where you can go when you start out, and we can help you prepare to get to a level 8, 9, and you can work towards that. If it means you need that GED, if it means you need some computer skills, if it means you need some college or community tech work, then we'll be able now to be able to fashion our development for our employees so they can see results and want to stay with us versus leaving us, and they'll be happy and their families will be happy. And the citizens of Winston will be happy because they're going to get even better service from our employees. They'll be better customer providers. So right now where we stand, I know how much work, and you guys have kind of kept me in the loop. I think we're moving in the right direction. I really do.
Mr. Burke.
Yes, I was going to ask, not Ms. Caruth, but the city manager. Usually when we start talking about employees at the end of the year, and I'm sure you'll tell us this, about how many people will be retiring and leaving the job. That puts us in a position to be able to carry out what we want to do with the changing of the budget. In this,
we always count on that to help us we'll have that number with the budget, but we always have some really good turnover that helps. I will caution you on the police side. This will help us, but we're in an arms race on law enforcement because of the significant reduction in applications nationwide. So this is the latest data, but Raleigh raised pay not long ago. Greensboro's talking about it. It will continue. So over the years, I'm afraid we'll be back again for more for law enforcement.
Thank you, Ms. Caruth.
Thank you.
Okay, so to continue with the FY18 budget expenditure request, this is a list of the new proposed positions that came from city departments. The first position listed is not a general fund position. We only listed it because it will increase our full-time employee count in the ordinance, but it's a position in the utilities, and it's covered 100% by the enterprise fund. The second position is a fire inspector. This is the second inspector out of 3 over a 3-year time frame. There's a pool crew coordinator for the spray grounds and the pool. And actually, all of these last 4 positions are related to cover positions related to the bond projects. So it's to staff those projects. So it's a total of 8 general fund positions and 1 non-general fund.
Where's the other 9 positions?
Well, it's 2 lake attendants, 2 maintenance mechanics, 2 pool specialists, 1 pool coordinator, and 1 fire inspector.
Okay, so that's 9.
7, 8.
The headline says there are 18.
Fiscal year 18.
Oh, fifth, oh, God, duh. Close. It's been a long day.
You're going to be on the staple.
That's right. To get behind the
That's the way I was
staple.
reading. I said 18 new
We had
positions.
17 last year.
I didn't see why.
Mayor.
I had to say, I did the same thing.
Did you?
Yeah.
Looking for it.
No, I
Mayor.
counted up.
Oh, Councilmember McIntosh.
In the column headings, I understand what salary and benefits are. What's the operating column?
It's operating costs related to the positions, things they may need to basically fulfill the positions requirements. So usually some things don't come with operating costs. It might be a computer, iPad, something related to the fire inspector that they need to be able to function.
Okay, thank you. Councilman.
To that end, what are we looking for that's $30,000?
I believe it's a vehicle, isn't it? The vehicle.
Oh, it's a car, okay,
Yeah.
all right. I just want to make sure that what kind of equipment.
They're really
Not a
nice.
computer.
A car.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Councilmember Burke?
I wanted to go back for a minute to talk about the property taxes.
Okay.
In the area of east, houses that located in Castle Heights, and they were selling them for 10 and 12,000, and people got anxious and started selling their properties. And I think this is to the manager too. What we need to do, encourage citizens who live in areas where the property value went down so low, the county helped to make it go, and because they're the ones who evaluate it, not us city people. If you will, and I tried to tell the people, what you need to do, don't sell your property. Wait until the value of property tax. Now, to give an example, I've had to go back to work. You know, I stopped working, but I had somebody else trying to work for me. They was going to put me in the poorhouse. So I decided I'd go back to work, and I started looking at houses. Right off of Carver School Road, I called about one on Airport Road. The lady called me back. It's at $120,000, which is giving people now the hope that property taxes are going up. On television, all today, they were talking about the sale of houses, and more of the income people are buying more. Oh, you know that, don't you? Buying more houses. So I don't know how and what we can do to make the residents, when they come into our neighborhoods and lower our taxes, and they get, homes, and they get so excited and start selling them for nothing.
Yeah. John Burgess at 7 o'clock is going to give an update. I think he'll probably have some really good insight on that very thing, Mayor Pro Tem Burke. Yeah. And you're right. Different sides of towns, it varies. But he has a calculation, and he's going to explain how he gets those projections.
Thank you.
So here is the projected budget gap. Right now, we're projecting $4.2 million. On the expenditure side, it's everything that we saw in the highlight slides. It includes the 1/3 study, compensation. It also includes the same level of service that the city has provided this current fiscal year. And so we see a $202 million expenditure. On the revenue side, we're projecting $198 million in revenues, $2 million is fund balance, and $196 is the ongoing revenues. Just as a reminder, we put in the Transit Authority 2 slides. You've seen these before. The blue line is the current projection. The gray line is if we added a 1-cent increase for WISTA, and the yellow line is a 1.5-cent increase scenario. This is how we...
Excuse me, Councilman Clark.
Yeah. Again, y'all can check on this later, but it used to be, and I know somewhere I'm talking about the blue line, somewhere back we did an increase in the amount of sales tax, property tax that went to mass transit. But why all of a sudden is it trending down so dramatically? What has changed? Is it less money from the state, federal, whatever?
Councilmember Clark, there are really principally 2 factors. One, the amount of federal money that the city will be receiving is being allocated now not only to Winston-Salem but also to the Piedmont Authority for Regional Transportation in Davidson County as part of the MPO. I think that's about maybe $750,000 of an ongoing impact. Secondly, we are factoring in matches for federal funding that we receive to replace buses, and we still need to replace a number of our large buses. And so even though that's a 20% match, those buses are expensive, and so that can amount to a good bit. And also, actually, thirdly, too, the redesign of the system it has resulted in a net cost. And so really those three factors have accelerated the increase, have accelerated the drawdown of the reserves.
And the new system, if I remember correctly, was about $500,000 a year more?
Yes, sir.
About right, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
This is how we compare to Durham, Greensboro, and Raleigh. Winston-Salem, about 50% of the transit budget is our local funding. Greensboro, there's an asterisk there. Theirs look a little less, but they actually receive an annuity of approximately $900,000 from Duke Energy to support their public transportation services. So ours is really lower than the other neighboring cities in the state. The property tax proposal to close.
Mr. Marston,
Yeah, it looks, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but, we're talking about percentages and total local funding, but it looks like Winston-Salem's total budget for transportation services is way below the other cities. Is that true?
That's true.
I mean, we're talking about, we look at percentages, like, look at Durham, they're saying, well, they're paying 61% of their budget, and that's $13,000. Well, that means their overall budget is close to $22,000. I mean, 22 million, whatever, $1 million that they're spending, whereas our total is 16 million.
That's right.
So, I mean, the fact that the percentages as compared to overall budget for the transportation services, I mean, this we're worse off than what this is showing. Is that?
That's true. Typically, our service is lower than there's other communities. So, and of course, some of them are larger. So,
They're larger
but
cities.
but yes, if you look at Durham and Greensboro,
Yeah, we're 50%. If $8 million is 50%, that means our overall budget's only 16 million as compared to, say, Durham or whatever, that's considerably less. I mean, considerably more. It's not a happy number.
Councilmember Bessie?
Could you explain further the division on this page, for WISTA between the current and the reserves? What is our actual current level that we are setting aside for transit funds?
The total 415, but the reserves is 0.53 cents. So our current rate is 3.62.
So the next or the previous page where you have the blue line showing the trend to take it under if we don't do something.
That's right.
By the end of this year, does that include the 0.53?
It includes the 3.62 cent current rate.
But
and
it
the
does,
reserves is what's declining. So if we don't do anything with the reserves, we'll be on that blue line.
so the current is 4.15.
That's right, total.
And the 0.53 cent increments that's dedicated to reserves currently is included in the blue trend line that shows it's going into the red.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So this next slide is how do we close the gap? And how do we also support WISTA? So this particular proposal suggests a 3-cent tax rate increase. 2 cents would support the general fund, and 1 cent would support WISTA. So that was the gray line we saw on the WISTA slide that kind of stabilizes it for at least 5 years or so. So how do we get to this calculation? First, we looked at the revenue neutral calculation. We divided the FY17 property tax level with the FY18 property tax base that came from the tax office. That gives us 56 cents. And then we looked at a 3-year growth in the actual tax base over 3 years. It was a 1.46% average. We multiplied those two things together and got 57.9 cents for the revenue neutral calculation. So when you take the revenue neutral rate and add 3 cents, the proposed tax rate would be 60.29 cents. 1 penny will get us about $2.1 million. So if you look at the chart below, it breaks it down by fund, the general fund, debt service fund, and transit fund. You see our current rate of 58.5. Revenue neutral rate is 57.29. The proposed tax rate is 60.29 cents, and that's a rate change of 3. And you see it's distributed 2 cents for general fund, 1 cent for transit, and then you see it's about a $6.3 million increase in revenue. So if we compare it by fiscal year, this is what our trend looks like in terms of the property tax rate. So the last column is the proposed rate of 60.29. The asterisk shows the revaluation years over time. So in 2010, 2014, and of course 2018. The next slide shows what the tax bill would look like for single-family residents. And you see the home value. We started at $50,000 because there are a few properties that are in that range, and we went up to just $250,000, just as an example of what the tax bill will look like. So if you own a $150,000 home, your current bill is $878. The revenue neutral rate would be $859, and the new proposed tax rate is $904. So that's a difference between the current bill and the proposed rate of $26, just as an example.
And,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I felt that this was a good way to let the citizen understand when you give them this type of map or diagram, it makes it easier for them to understand.
Yes.
Can you tell us what is the median home value in Winston-Salem currently?
I cannot, but I can get you that information.
Please, thank you. Again, the median is what I'm looking for rather than the mean.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's it. This is our budget review calendar. The distribution.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Yep, I know we can jump into the calendar pieces, and I just want to step back, and I'll make these same comments this evening at the council meeting in reference when Mr. Burgess comes. But I have some additional concerns just from methodology and standpoint on appraisal pieces. From my understanding, as it exists now, although there will be a % increase overall for the city, there still is a section of the community that will have about a 30% decrease in property values. And in particular, these communities and these neighborhoods are lower income and minority communities and neighborhood where this happens. And the methodology that's being used is a sales approach to the appraisal process, which in these neighborhoods I believe is extremely flawed, from the premise that in many of these neighborhoods you have more rental properties than you do home ownership. And thus, when they appraise an apartment complex at a multifamily place, they do it based on income approach, meaning They look at how much are individuals paying in rent, thus how much money comes in, and that's how they set the value on the property. In these neighborhoods, you have individuals who are living in properties that are valued at $35,000, but they're paying $725 in rent, which makes absolutely no economic sense when you look at value in comparison. I think that, again, Mr. Burgess and his office are using this standard, industry standard, on how they're approaching it, but I think it's flawed, and I think it's worth challenging, and I've asked for legal thoughts and opinions on that because I think it may be necessary, and I'm willing to push the envelope that there's a legal challenge to the methodology used in these neighborhoods in order to get a better valuation on what true value stands in the neighborhoods where 80% of the properties are rental, but you use a sales approach that does not give true value on what people are paying. And I think that's a flawed method. And I think, again, if it was in the best interest of the county, they'd use a different method if that was the industry standard, because it doesn't help them to have the values decrease. But I think it plays into an inaccurate theme in the community that there's an intentionality on decreasing the values in certain parts of the community for an attempted land grab. And I think that we have to speak to that, and I think we should challenge the methodology that's being used, because I think that is flawed, and I don't think that it gives people who are living in and who are homeowners in those neighborhoods true values on their property. And I just want to mention that because I think it impacts budget, and I think that it's something that, as a council member who represents some of these communities, something I'll be fully pushing forward on, and this council may be asked to consider something at some point in time along those lines.
To follow up with that, you are correct about the conditions of the neighborhoods, and I've said this so many times. You have these landlords who are absentee, and they don't care about how their property looks. Now, some of them are renting some of those houses for $200 a month. I think you need to, what I would do, say to the manager, I feel that what we need to do with the people over there at the county is to pull out in our wards the problems that Mr. Montgomery stated. The bulk of them, I believe, sits in the east and right adjacent to the northeast, and we're just overflowing with a lot of slum, absentee landlords who are not really doing anything much to try to improve their properties. But I feel we need to get a number to see how many we're actually talking about and where they're actually located. Like at one time, we had a significant number of foreclosures came out of the northeast and the southeast, and they could show us that. But we need to now see what Mr. Montgomery is talking about, where we can see these properties.
Want to go through the schedule?
Okay. On May 25th, that will be the distribution of the budget proposal to mayor and council. On Thursday, June the 1st, is a finance committee workshop, just another budget overview and highlights again. On Tuesday, June the 6th, there will be a review of the capital plan and highlights from that. On June 8th, another finance committee, is actually the public hearing on June the 8th here in the council chamber. Monday, June the 12th, finance committee, a workshop, and that will be a consideration of a recommended budget and the property tax rate. June 12th also will be the public safety committee meeting, so there will be a review of the budgets for the police, fire, and emergency management. On June 13th, this is only if needed, an additional finance committee workshop. And then June 19th would be the public hearing and adoption of the budget.
Questions on the schedule?
Since we're looking at the transit fund, it might be a good idea to have a review of that part of the budget in front of the Public Works Committee.
Okay. Do that. Councilmember Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor. If we'll move to the last page. Ms. Tony, I think you're finished, correct?
I'm finished.
All right. The last item on the 2018 bond project operating costs is the Quarry Park. We went around to the community, and we had several meetings about Quarry Park. And one of the things that came up was the possibility of adding additional security to secure Quarry Park. Because what we're seeing is people coming in and out of the neighborhood both ways, in and out of the park. So I'm noticing for year 2018, the operating costs, it looks like will be about $81,000. I'd just like to get a sense of the breakdown of those operating costs. If additional security is not added in the budget, maybe we can talk about maybe adding it into the Parks and Recs budget, or whatever the case may be, but we have to have additional security for that park, Mr. Manager.
I was going to say to Miss Tony to let them know you may be a new face, but you're well prepared
Yes,
to
ma'am.
stand before people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Bessie?
Just one note in terms of impact on this year's budget. I checked with Councilmember Montgomery just a moment ago. It's my understanding that your point about the revaluation method, while extremely timely, would, if there were to be a successful challenge, it wouldn't come back in time to impact this year's budget figures. Is that right? Okay.
And if it were to, it would raise our numbers.
All right, Manager?
Mayor, what we'll be doing is we'll be coming back. We'll get the counties, we'll hopefully get some better tax numbers for personal property after April 15th. So we're hoping it looks a little better than this. This is worst case. And then early May, we'll be doing, budget staff and myself will be doing some individual meetings with all of you to try to just make sure that we're going the right way before we present that budget in May. So we'll be back informally to talk to all of you one-on-one, and then before we release the budget at the end of May.
Very good. Mr. McClark?
I guess I'll address this to the city attorney, since she's our representative for Raleigh. Do we know of anything yet coming out of Raleigh that would impact our budget significantly or materially?
There are a number of pending bills regarding retirement for police officers, separation allowance for firefighters, the redistribution bill. There are several pending bills.
Because I noticed when we were down last week, I asked the question to several of our elected folks down there as far as the state budget, and they said they're really waiting until April 15th when they kind of have a better feel of what their revenue is for last year. And they dealt off a bit. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we've covered everything on our agenda. Without objection, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned.